I am with Luke Woodward from Biscuits and Berries Catering in Golden, Colorado. Luke is the Director of Catering and Assistant General Manager. And I think we have a fantastic topic today because you have shared with me earlier some tips for pulling off, staying on task for pulling off an amazing event. A lot of that I thought was incredible when I read some of your points and could relate to those. I think it will help the community out there to hear it directly from you, the things you want to share. So I'm excited to have you share that. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and Biscuits and Berries.
Sure, I'd love to. As John said, I'm Luke with Biscuits and Berries Catering. Been with the company here for about 5 years. Been in the catering industry and the service industry for almost the entirety of my career. Biscuits and Berries Catering has been around and in business since 1993. We currently operate as one of the larger caterers in the Denver metro area. We're a full service catering company, so we offer everything from small delivery and drop off style business to full scale galas, weddings, nonprofit style events. One of the things that kind of makes Biscuits and Berries unique in the industry is we cook everything from scratch on site. And that's not to say, that we cook most of the food in our kitchen, bring it out on site and warm it up in an oven. We actually cook everything from scratch on site, bring a full kitchen out on site, can, execute a big wedding in the middle of a field if that's what's necessary. But it's a lot of fun, a lot of moving pieces.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That's awesome. And I wanted to thank you also for being part of the TPB family. So your first tip for staying on task to pull off an incredible event.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, there's no substitute for advanced planning. What I mean by that is going above and beyond what might be kind of a typical planning session or planning meeting between, a designer, an executive chef, the operations team, but really putting together a meeting with a purpose and going through advanced planning for your events. And that can be broken down in a myriad of ways, really kind of depends on the event itself. But the most important thing is to go into it and have a plan, have somebody who's in charge of the meeting and puts together kind of bullet points of how the meeting or how the event rather is going to progress, what's going to happen, what are kind of the important points, and bringing a group of people together, all of whom are kind of responsible in their own ways for making that event happen. So what I mean by that is certainly having some of your leadership team there, somebody to kind of guide the event, steer the event, make sure that everything is going well. But certainly the event designer, the person who's been kind of chiefly in charge of selling the event and has the most knowledge of kind of the ins and the outs of the event. Also, your operations team, absolutely critical. They're going to have kind of a different perspective than the event designer. They're going to be looking at things in kind of more of a pragmatic and logical point of view than an event designer would. And certainly the culinary team as well. And I'd also recommend for an event that you feel is logistically challenging or just really, really big or outside of the purview of what you do on kind of an everyday basis, it's important to have everybody involved who shares some sort of role in the event there on site, including whomever is going to be running the event on site. Again, everybody kind of comes to these meetings with a different perspective, and that is just so critical to have, because an event designer, the person kind of looking at it from the creative point of view, is not necessarily going to be thinking about the logistical challenges of executing an event like the culinary team would, or like the operations team would, or even like the event manager would, the event captain, the person kind of on site tasked with running the event. So having all of those different perspectives there, all in one place, kind of offering feedback and questioning things, thinking through different logistical issues that could come up, so critical to have just kind of that meeting of the minds.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Advanced planning for sure. So is there a specific rhythm? You mentioned meetings, like if there's a rhythm or a cadence of when they happen, you know, we you know, on a Monday we do this, or Tuesday, what does that look like?
So every Tuesday, Biscuits and Berries has an operational meeting where we go through every single staffed event that we're having. So that's all of our event designers, myself, our executive chef, our general manager, and representatives from our operations team. We
Okay.
go through every event in what I would describe as kind of reasonable detail. So we're going over all the basic nuts and bolts: when we're leaving, when we're arriving on site, when serve time, you know, what's food look like, guest count, dietary restrictions, those kinds of things that you should really be considering about every event. But for kind of an extraordinary event, again, one that's kind of outside of the purview of what you would do every single day, to answer your question, there's not necessarily kind of an average cadence to one of those meetings, but what I would highly recommend is making sure that you have somebody in charge and making sure that you have somebody who has kind of an outline of things to discuss. One of the
Yeah.
mistakes that I've seen made, that, you know, certainly we've made and learned from, is when you have this kind of meeting in the minds with a group of people talking about an event, it's really easy to go down rabbit holes. It's really easy to waste people's time. And it's also easy to kind of miss and skip things you wished you talked about. So kind of having somebody who's running point for the meeting has kind of a general outline of, I want to make sure we talk about these things. I'm concerned about point A, B, and C. I really want to get the input of my director of operations, or
Okay.
I want to get the input of my director of staffing on these sorts of things. Just having an outline and a goal and a plan before going into it means that you're going to get a lot more kind of meat off the bone, so to speak, in those meetings.
Okay. Yeah. So that happens like so typically on a Tuesday, but for some of the bigger events. So this person, this is such an interesting point. Like this person, what is it? What do they have to prepare to be ready for it? You said, you know, that's critical that they have all the detail. Are they just printing out production sheets or proposals? What does that look like?
Yeah, it should be somebody who's been involved to some degree in the event. And it really kind of depends, to be honest, on the organizational structure of the catering company. You know,
Okay.
with us, we have our general manager who's very involved, myself who's very involved, and our general manager comes from a culinary background. He used to be our executive chef. He's been involved in fine dining for a very long time. So he kind of brings a very unique skill set to the table. Myself, while I love food, I certainly shouldn't be confused with an executive chef. I'm looking at things more from a sales operational perspective. So somebody like that who's been kind of tangent to adjacent to the event as it's come to fruition should be somebody kind of running point on the event, somebody who's familiar with it, somebody who also has the ability to kind of ask pointed questions to all of the different people involved and has enough experience to say, hey, yeah, I know this is your timeline. I'm a little bit concerned about the room flip here, or you know, this station is really, really, really involved. I don't know that we have enough people, you know, on the back of house side to be able to execute this, or can you explain this to me? Or is somebody who has enough experience with, you know, kind of the minutia of events to be
Yeah.
able to kind of pick out things like, wait a minute, we've done this before. That doesn't necessarily work out the way that you think it's going to. Let's rethink this, to kind of think about the problems that may arise before they actually come up.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. So, so advanced planning is, you know, the devil's in the detail. It sounds like it, and
Yeah,
amazing teamwork. Like those two things. That's sort of what I'm taking away from that.
absolutely. Yeah, that's and that kind of leads me into my second point, or the thing that I think is kind of secondly most important, is knowing your team and knowing who's involved, boots on the ground. So if you have an extraordinary event, a difficult event, it stands to reason you're trying to put your strongest people on that event. But that's, you know, kind of a pie in the sky ideal. You know, those of us running catering companies where we have multiple events going on concurrently, you can't always put the A team on one event, because then by definition, you're putting a weaker team on different events. And that really doesn't lend itself to success either. So you're going to need to kind of arrange your teams in such a fashion that you're confident that every event is going to be successful. And what that means for this one particular event, this one extraordinary event, is you may not have the A team. And so it's so important for you to know who you have, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. And again, this is part of kind of going into that planning meeting, understanding what it's going to require to execute this event, not just showing up on site and things should take care of itself from there. But, when is cocktail hour? When is dinner service? What do the stations look like? What are the issues? Who's going to be, if we have a bunch of kind of green people, that means that you need somebody who's going to be kind of leading those green people. Like, hey, it's time to do this. It's time to do that. We need to do room service. We're about 15 minutes behind here. We need to make sure we get all the linens down, what have you. Just having a really wholesale idea of exactly who's going to be at your event. Right. And understanding, again, those strengths and weaknesses and kind of planning for, I have 3 people on this event where this, they've only ever worked 1 or 2 or 3 events before. It's really important that, I maybe not necessarily talk to an event captain, but talk to somebody else who's been with your company for a long period of time. Like, hey, so here's going to be kind of your sub event within the event is going to be handling this set of things with these people, and just keeping them on task so that you can get as much productivity out of those people as possible, and still kind of stay on time with your event and not have to be kind of scrambling last minute.
Yeah, I love that because it's dear to my heart too, is like, knowing your team, who your players are. I think as business owners, sometimes we forget that people are our biggest asset, right? That it's, yes, the sales and the client is important, but without our people, we would not be able to execute. So you mentioned, we've got some of the staff that maybe, have some strengths and weaknesses. Do you have any recommendations for like training, or how do you get people to kind of always level up and be better and learn more? And it's part of, retention too. We want to keep our best players on the team, and that's going to be through challenging them and making them better and stronger. So do you guys have any specific recommendations on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that every organization strives for and talks about is, growing and managing a team, kind of raising all boats, having a really healthy atmosphere. And, one thing that is so important to us is keeping good people. The service industry by definition can be kind of transient in that, the people in entry-level positions kind of come and go. But the strength of Biscuits and Berries, and the strength, I think, of any good catering company, is the strength of its core employees. So one thing that I think is so important is making it a little less kind of autocratic and more empowering your team. So, we're lucky enough at Biscuits and Berries to have a bunch of core employees who've been with Biscuits and Berries for, I think our longest tenured non-director level employee has been here for 16 years.
Wow.
And we have a number of people who have been here for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And I think what's so important is empowering them to be kind of a part of the solution. Talk is cheap. And, when you go into a meeting with your entire team and you're trying to communicate, this is the direction of our company, this is who we are, this is what we're going to do. When you're the person in charge of a company, I think those words have a tendency to kind of fall short. Whereas if they're coming from your core employees, they're coming from the people who are working the events, they're the boots on the ground, they're the people at the events working hard, I think it really resonates with the team. And as such, one of the strategies that we try to employ is having those core employees handle a lot of our training. I think the benefit is kind of twofold. Number one, it really empowers those core employees to feel both like, they're really a part of the solution, they're really doing something good, and it makes them also feel valued. I think that is something that is just, it keeps people engaged. And furthermore, when you see an event captain or just somebody who's kind of a core employee who's been with your business for 6, 7, 8 years leading a training, they have so much more credibility than somebody who's a director of catering that they don't see often at events. It resonates more and it builds that kind of camaraderie. There's a lot more rapport that they have there. And again, the credibility thing, I can't stress it enough. They're going to be listening. They believe in what the person is talking about. And as long as you have those core employees engaged in believing in your company and the direction in which you want to move, there's no better salesperson to the rest of your employees than somebody who's already a core employee and already bought in.
Right. Oh, so much gold there. That is just gold. Empowering, making me feel part of the solution, part of the team, more duties than they have had. That's just gold. Awesome. I think all that plays into too, like culture. Do you guys have like a specific culture that you've been building? And I mean, having employees that long, 16 years, 7 years, 8 years, there must be something that they're hanging on to. And sounds like the belief system in the leadership team, but is there anything else that really resonates with the staff?
I think at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter what kind of company you are in terms of what your kind of company niche is. For us, we're just a really food forward catering company. It's really important to us. That's how we sell to our clients. But it's at the end of the day, it's actually the truth. That again, like I had alluded to previously, our general manager was our executive chef, and our executive chef and general manager have been working together for more than a decade and grew up in Denver fine dining. Like, we're just a very, very, very food forward catering company. It's really important to us. And, you get clients where that's not necessarily as important to them, and they're not necessarily the best clients for us, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, I think you just have to have a clear, crystallized, who are you? What's your company's identity? And then just make sure that it's genuine.
Yeah.
And for us, I think that's that's who we are at our core, is just, we really legitimately care. We make mistakes just like every other catering company makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's close to perfect, but just as long as you know who you are, you know what direction you want to move in, and that's communicated to your team, you're transparent with them, and your integrity, I think, is kind of second to none there too. Again, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but like, really, talk is cheap. You can say all you want to say and put together all these amazing words about how great of a company you are, but at the end of the day, you have to live it. And people, especially people in the service industry, are going to see through you immediately if you're not authentic. So I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what kind of catering company you are, or what your kind of creed is or motto or whatever, but as long as you're authentic, people are going to follow you and believe in you because it's going to resonate with them. So I think that's the most important thing.
Well, you said, hey, we're foodies and we care about people. Like, every business watching this, obviously, people start businesses to build businesses, but if that's the number one goal, is just build the business, that's not going to be as successful as when you're starting at the root of, we're foodies who want to help people. That's the culture. That's what you're going to build and grow on. That's spot on. Okay, so we're building and growing an amazing team and a great culture so they can do all this great advanced planning to pull off an amazing event. What else do we need to get to that mountaintop?
Sure. At the end of the day, one of my favorite quotes is from Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And anybody who's listening to or watching this podcast understands, you can have an incredible planning process and an incredible team. In the events industry, it is absolutely inevitable that something will go wrong. Especially, I feel like the more well prepared you are and the more well planned you are, definitely something's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, there's absolutely no substitute for just having a strong captain and for setting that event captain up for success. Obviously, a large part of having a strong captain or somebody who's in charge of the event on the day of the event is in your kind of day-to-day training process, company culture, again, making sure they have the employees there to set them up for success. You've done all your advanced planning, you've got the food there, and all of a sudden, maybe it's a client or the planner or the venue or the weather or something entirely out of your control throws you for a loop. The only way to bail yourself out there is with a strong team and by extension a strong captain. And I can't stress this enough, and I see companies making these mistakes often. Your event captain, the person in charge of your events on the day of, should not be the person folding napkins or laying down linens or in the kitchen. They should be in charge of the event. They are the executive of that event. They should be well-versed in how to delegate, but they should also be the person who can take that kind of bird's eye view of an event and be in a position to have enough perspective to correct an issue or change mid-course or whatever that event may require to be successful. And they can't do that if they're in the woods. You can't see the forest through the trees, right? So if they're down on the ground, helping your team, set up tables, chairs, linens, fold napkins, what have you, they're not understanding that, there's something going wrong in the kitchen, or the event planner has a real serious issue and something has changed dramatically with your timeline. They need to be actually in charge of your event and put in a position where they can succeed, because of the inevitability that something at every event is going to go wrong, or is at least going to change from kind of that original plan.
Yeah. So what I hear is you're saying somebody who's just focused on the success, and if there is something that their whole mindset is fixing that problem, because if you have too many people trying to do too many ideas, it sounds like that one person, that strong captain, really needs to take the lead and get through that.
Absolutely. Yep,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
when it comes from so much experience in leadership, and when you have it, that's anybody running a catering company has kind of that ace event captain where, like, this is a tough event, it's challenging, there's a million moving pieces, and I want them on that event because regardless of what happens, they're going to handle whatever comes up, as well as anybody else in the company. Those people are just invaluable.
Yeah, something like that triage point. Somebody needs to be there. So if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to find somebody within my organization to be a strong captain, or even go out and hire one, that wouldn't be inconceivable. What traits would I look for? What makes a great event captain to handle the pretty big pressure of that role?
Sure. For whatever it's worth, I think hiring an ace event captain may be the most difficult position to hire in a company, because there are so many different traits that are absolutely required to have a good event captain. So you need somebody who's tough. You need somebody who's going to be able to work hard, someone who can certainly work long hours and whose work quality is not going to suffer from hour 1 to hour 12 of their event shift. You need somebody who's smart. You need somebody who can think on their feet. I can't tell you how many different events we'll have that, are 4 or 5 hours away from Biscuits and Berries. And what that means is they're entirely on their own. There's no, we forgot this, or this didn't show up, or whatever. They've got to be able to handle those situations entirely autonomously. So, leadership qualities are critical, almost impossible to interview for. So is work ethic. I'm, still struggle with the ability to find, I have no idea how to interview for work ethic, right? That's just kind of one of those things where you find out once you've hired them, you've made the decision, you think you made the best decision you could. But at the end of the day, having somebody who's just completely capable of, things went wrong, there's nobody here to help me, and I'm going to solve this problem on my feet. I think that above all else is the most important quality. But again, you're not going to have a great event captain if they have that ability, but aren't willing to work hard, aren't willing to lead, aren't willing to delegate, all those things. There's so many things that go into a successful event captain. That's why, I think every one of our event captains except one, and we have 12, are all internal hires.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. And there are some risks that you can take if somebody has just a plethora of experience, and maybe, a catering company, because of COVID, went out of business. They've been a successful event captain and they want to come over. That's something we'll consider. But that's difficult too, because a lot of times you run into an issue where you're kind of trying to have somebody unlearn, quote unquote, bad habit, or just learn how you do things different than somebody else does things. And that can be even more of a challenge with somebody who has a plethora of experience. So in terms of what we are really looking for with an event captain, and a lot of the questions that I try to ask in an interview is just trying to find out if that person's really willing to work hard enough. A lot of the other qualities in an event captain are impossible to interview for. You can ask those questions, and if you have somebody who's smart, they're going to answer the right way. It's so tough to have that interview and to really successfully hire off the street that person.
Yeah.
So like 99% of the time, you want somebody coming internally who's hungry. You already know all of their kind of extemporaneous qualities. You put them in that position and then they succeed. But otherwise, just trying to find somebody with that kind of grit, work ethic, I think is most important in an interview.
You're probably saving somebody a lot of time and energy and money by that advice. And I think it goes back to your second point too, about knowing your team and understanding who they are and growing that. So if you find somebody who has a lot of those qualities, you can mentor and get them up to that level where they would need to be the strong captain.
Sure. And I would say too, conversely, and I've made this mistake before, I have a pretty strong sales background, and one of the old sales adages is never promote your strongest salesperson to be a sales manager. And that can be kind of a mistake that I've seen people make as well in this industry. Is you have somebody who's they work really hard, they're a core employee, they do everything you ask, they maybe show leadership in spurts here and there. They're one of those people on a big event where you have a couple of green employees, you put them with this other person, and things turn out really well. One mistake I've seen people make more often than not is, again, kind of promoting that strong salesperson to a sales manager. You promote that strong core person to a captain. Just make sure you're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. That leadership quality, when you're promoting somebody from someone who's a core employee to an event designer, that specifically, that leadership quality, I think is the most difficult thing for those people to master, when previously they weren't in charge. They weren't the person, where if something goes wrong, it's kind of on this person's shoulders. They've never been that person before. They've never felt that stress. But furthermore, I think it's really difficult for people who are in that position, kind of working amongst their peers. It's one thing to be a leader amongst your peers because you're a quality employee, and then be promoted into a position in which now all of a sudden you're not just a better employee than the rest of your peers, and so they look to you for guidance and leadership. Now you're in charge, and that kind of vacuum, that kind of change in dynamic can be a real challenge, and it takes a really strong person to kind of push through that. So paying close attention to that, I think, is important too.
Yeah, well stated. So the captains that you'd mentioned, like, hey, you have to make sure that if anything doesn't quite go as planned, the Mike Tyson quote. What just for fun, because I know everybody listening has had a situation like that. What's one of the things that you can think of offhand that didn't quite go as planned, the captain was able to save the day.
Well, we could probably talk for an hour.
I'm
just
sure, yeah.
specifically.
Every event, I mean, catering is so fluid. And
Yeah. One though comes to mind, and it ended up in retrospect being kind of a humorous example. But I was actually the captain on this event, and was working. It was at the end of 2017, I think, the end of the holiday season of 2017. We'd been super, super busy. We kind of knew we were right at the end of it. And in fact, I think this was our last staffed event for like 3 weeks. So we've gone through this grueling, 3-week holiday party stretch. And everybody's, working a million hours and tired and whatever. And it was the Murphy's Law event of all Murphy's Laws. So we got on site, we're missing some stuff, call my operations manager. Hey, I'm missing XYZ, bring it out to me. We were cooking tenderloins on site. I didn't have a knife or a cutting board. So we've got these tenderloins, we've got them cooked on site, and I have absolutely nothing on which to cut the tenderloins. So use a pocket knife in the back of a sheet pan to cut the tenderloins.
wow.
And that was just the first of several things that went wrong. And this was actually at a previous catering company, but I had brought out a Bunsen burner to fire hors d'oeuvres on. The German burner was malfunctioning, so it was trying to fire it. Finally got it to go, but it leaked enough butane to where once I fired it, all the butane caught fire on the table. So, butane is heavier than air. So you've got this layer of butane sitting on a table, and it finally lights, and all the butane lights on fire and lights all of my arm hairs on fire and eyebrows on fire subsequently.
Wow.
So that we've got that coupled with the steak issue. And then the desserts, all of the desserts for the party were left back at the kitchen, which weren't noticed until like half an hour before the desserts were supposed to be served. Mind you, it's December in Denver and it's snowing. So at that point, because of the way service was going, I ended up leaving, went to the kitchen, got back to the event venue, served the desserts. And the great irony was I had set myself on fire. We had nothing to cut the tenderloins with. We'd forgotten a bunch of stuff for the event and didn't have any desserts. And the client comes back at the end of the event, and I can't imagine how haggard I must have looked at that point. But she comes back, and I'm thinking like, oh, all right, she's about to give it to me. And she just tells me like, hey, I just wanted to thank you. This was just such a smooth event. I just couldn't believe nothing went wrong. And I just really, wanted to say I appreciate it.
Wow.
And it was all I could do just to bite my tongue, but that I think is kind of the epitome of this industry is, things can be quite literally on fire in the back of the house. But if you pull off the event, it's a successful event. And it's to date one of my favorite stories to tell.
Yeah, and you did your job as the captain, because to have the client come in and say thank you, that's what it's about at the end of the day. They had no idea. I mean, everything was just, going wrong, and you had you were burning, and the steak was going to get cut, and the dessert was far away. But to have them come in and thank you, that I think for a caterer, I know when I was catering as a young kid, that that applause at the end of the night, when people, they would sometimes like call the caterer out and they would start clapping like that. That's why we did it. It came down to just making the client happy. And that captain, like had you just given up and said, oh, this event is just, this one's done, forget it, we'll just pack up and go, like there would have been a lot of unhappy people. So it's an important role.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day, and I think that, to be totally honest, this is a trait shared with everybody in the industry, is stuff goes wrong all the time, and you're kind of used to that. You're used to that stress. And I'd be lying if I didn't say, a lot of that stress I kind of enjoy. There's no better feeling or gratification than I just got my rear end handed to me for hours and we pulled it off.
Yeah.
And it's always a we pulled it off, and I think that's what makes it so much fun and so rewarding.
Yeah.
Is you go through all those things with everybody else who's there, and so, the person running the front of the house or the back of the house or this server or this bartender or whomever it is, like they all understand and they're all going through it too. And they're all stressed out about it as well.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, when you pull it off and you do it with this team, like there is no better feeling than just be like, yeah, we did this. All right.
Luke, this was awesome. I think anyone listening to this is going to get some amazing advice from you. I want to thank you again for being part of this. We really appreciate your time. And thank you. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, of course. I'd really appreciate it from you as well. And I would also say to conclude, anybody who thinks that I have my act together, you should know that the only reason I have any good answers is because I failed in every possible aspect I could have. This is such an incredibly challenging industry, but yeah, I couldn't encourage people to get in it more and to succeed more. And, any good piece of advice I have, it's because I've already made that mistake. And, I'm more than happy to kind of communicate that to anybody who's interested. So.
Yes, it's such a great life lesson. We get knocked down 7 times, we get up 8. So we learn from our mistakes. So yeah, great point, especially for, caterers starting out or just in a high growth phase even. Like there's, the more you're growing, the more opportunity for making mistakes. So staying focused on all these things that you just mentioned today is super important. Well, thank you, Luke. We appreciate you, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Cheers. Thanks, John.
Thank you.